Hey, Mike and Missy here. We recognize that this can be an intense time for marriages, and so we want to give you guys some practical tips to thrive through this crisis.
And if you have kids, we're going to throw in a bonus parenting tip that will help you disciple your kids throughout this time as well. So here we go.
All right, so what's the problem? Problem is you're probably not matching like we are. So that's probably the first problem.
That's your problem.
But the problem we're dealing with today in our video is assumptions. And in so many of our relationships, but specifically in marriage, we just tend to assume a lot of things and assumptions. So a lot of the material we're getting today is from a guy named Peter Scazzero that I've learned from. He would call this something different. I kind of changed the wording here, but let's start with assumptions. And he says this, when we have that, we often have unconscious ones, we have unrealistic ones, unspoken ones, and unagreed upon assumptions. And that's the problem. That's the issue. So what do? How do we get around that?
The prescription here is to seek to understand the other person. Which implies that there's work that needs to be done. So listen to what the Bible says about this. This is coming out of Proverbs 18, verse 2. It says, "A fool takes no pleasure in understanding, but only in expressing his opinion." So don't be a fool. Like, you have to actually work to, want understanding, and especially from your spouse, from someone who's, is one of the most important people here on earth, not Jesus, in your life, right? It also goes on and it hits the assumptions level. It says in verse 13, it says, "If one gives an answer before he hears, it is his folly and shame." So if you're assuming you already know the answer before you're even giving that person a chance, well then that's going to be your folly and shame in your marriage and whatever the content is of what you're assuming, right? So you don't really have a chance there. So what this means is essentially we need to set clear expectations, which is our practical, yeah.
Yeah, and I love that proverb. It's your own fault. It's saying it's your folly. It's your shame. So what's the practical here? How do we get around just having assumptions? Well, we move them, as Missy said, to expectations. Okay? And these, instead of being uncommunicated, unagreed upon, unrealistic, unspoken, unconscious, we move them to being conscious. So you want awareness there. That's the key. You want to make each other aware of the expectations that you're placing on one another. And so that they're not burdensome, they actually free you in your marriage. Then you want to take unrealistic expectations or assumptions and make them realistic expectations. Because guys, the goal here isn't to get rid of expectations. It's just to make them realistic. And if you can agree on those, and you can say, well, that's realistic for me and that's realistic for you, and take them into expectations, then you're going to start to create something really beautiful in your marriage. And then take the unspoken assumptions and make them spoken expectations. Again, you need to explicitly communicate your expectations, or else the other person is not going to know. They're just going to remain assumptions in your heart and your mind. They're going to continue to cause you frustration, and because you think, well, they should just know. How many times have you thought that in your marriage, or said that? They should just know that's what they should do. They should just know that's how I am. They should just know. How are they going to know unless you tell them? And you might be saying, well, I have told them. Tell them again. Tell them again until they get it. Lay out your expectations clearly. And when you do that, you take your unspoken, unconscious, unrealistic expectations, and you start to create assumptions. You start to create community when you start to communicate your agreed upon expectations, not your unagreed upon ones, but your agreed upon expectations. So start to do that in your marriage, guys. And you can also do this with your kids.
Yeah, absolutely. So for your bonus parenting tip, just recognize that you have assumptions for your kids. Lay it out there, admit it, identify it, but then seek to set very clear expectations for your kids. And so we have an equation for you. For those of you who are doing homeschool math with your children right now and enjoying that, we have an equation for you to help you remember this, right? Clear expectations minus cloudy assumptions will lead to consistent maturation. So think about that. And for kids, it helps to repeat, like you said, with your spouse. Like if you've told your kids over and over again what they need to do. We'll tell them again, and have them repeat it back to you so that you know that they understand what it is you're asking of them to do, right? And so just makes it very, very clear.
Yeah. One more time, guys. Clear expectations minus cloudy assumptions equals
consistent
maturation. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah.